It's a small bar, and I drive to the bar. I get there a little early. I sat down. Nobody's on stage. So I sat at the bar and had a beer. And then this guy comes out. Not particularly, didn't have a Stetson hat, didn't have rhinestones, didn't have anything like that. And I was like, well, this is interesting. And he got up and he played a couple of, I guess you'd call them standard, traditional country tunes. And he played in what's called Travis style, Travis picking. And I'm saying to myself, well, I guess it's better than listening to country and western, going to the other places. So I'm sitting at the bar listening, and he played a couple of songs. And then something changed. Now there was only a couple of other patrons in the bar. It's like he was playing for himself, not for anybody else at that point. It was relatively early, and something changed. My mouth just dropped. What is that? And I was paralyzed. I had never heard a guitar player do that in that way. After he was done with the set, I went up and talked to him. And I asked him if he was under contract to anybody, and he said no, that he was hanging out with Chet Atkins. He didn't tell me at that time about being on, he was basically under Chet's care. He was going through rehab at the time, and Chet was like a father to him and taking care of him. And I said, okay, so if he's with Chet Atkins, he's got to be signed to a major label or something. Nope, wasn't signed to anybody, and which I later found out why, etc. But at any rate, so we talked, and I said, well, I run a small record company, and I'd be very, very interested in signing you to certainly a one-record deal or a multi-record deal, whatever you want.
Lenny had heard that kind of thing before, and he was a little skeptical about it. He was a little bit underwhelmed by the offer, but when he made it up to New York, he got in touch with this fellow and made 3 records while he was staying up there for about 6 months.
He called me and said, hey, I've got one for you. It's a little bit from, from left field, but I have this genius guitar player that I want you to record. It's a little difficult. He has some problems with drugs, etc. He's supposed to be totally cleaned up now, and he's living in New York. And I said, okay, who is it? And gave me some information. So I immediately trotted down to, this must sound like Stone Age. I went to a record store and actually bought a copy of a vinyl record. This is pre-CD. And I listened to Lenny's recordings, and they were not very good. Not because he wasn't very good, but because it wasn't really very good music. Because nobody in Nashville understood what he was really thinking, what he was doing. And he was closed-minded. He was a polite guy. If you paid him, he would do what you wanted him to do. Now myself, I wanted him to do what he wanted to do, which is what Gene and I were able to capture, and that's why those are the classic recordings with him. And basically there's nothing else other than those recordings of what he actually was.
His career started out on the wrong foot to begin with in terms of the recording industry. His early career as part of the Breau family band was probably relatively successful for him in those days, at least for the Breau family, the Lone Pine family band. But once, I guess it was Chet Atkins, somebody decided to put him on as a country and western star, and it just didn't convert. That sort of killed his career, because trying to come back from terrible releases is much more difficult than starting a career from the beginning. And so he was just overlooked after that period of time. His records didn't sell. Nobody was interested in signing him. He was playing a kind of music that didn't have a natural following, and he wasn't interested in touring particularly. So all of that contributes to why his career didn't skyrocket up to the point we're talking about, at least.
So this was a complete departure from his previous recordings, okay? So the first day went by, I called Gene and I go, it's going absolutely great. He says, keep recording. So I said, it's going to cost more money. He says, you got the money? I said, yeah. He said, okay, keep doing it and I'll cover you. So we did, okay? He was incredible. I mean, I heard him play in his own apartment, rather like we're sitting here, just to get a feel for the material as to what he was going to do. But it was very free form, very, very loose with this, which I particularly liked. I didn't want to get an arranger into, this is the tune, oh, that could be a hit record. I'm going, he's playing an acoustic guitar solo. I mean, miking on those recordings are totally meticulous. You can even hear the finger noises on it, okay? And Lenny was such a good guitar player that he never fumbled and hit the microphone. But that microphone is like that away from the guitar. So you're inside the guitar when you're listening to these things. And we spent some time in doing the setup. I would say Joe spent a patient hour and a half on a solo guitar to get it exactly right, seated where he was comfortable with the boom mic. And we also had a room mic. So when you listen to that recording, you're getting a little depth of field on all of that. So then we just roll tape.
And it was magic. It was second day, everything I heard was magic. I couldn't believe that we were actually capturing it. And Dan told me that the first day was as good or better. It's like, keep rolling the tape, please, keep rolling the tape.
There's, on these recordings, you can hear him playing 3 parts at the same time, okay? He can play a bass part that's a repeating part. He can play a melodic line in the middle, and he improvises on the top. I don't know anybody else on earth who can do that, okay? I mean, maybe if it was all rehearsed, people could sort of pick it out who have the same finger-picking style, but this is just an amazing thing to see.
He liked a little bit of structure, but at the same time, he did do his own compositions where he took flights of fancy, but always, there was always a melody line. He would establish the melody line and then take you on a long flight, and then he will come back to it to let you know that, yes, this was the melody line. It was really thought through. It wasn't like he was just out on some wild toot. Very often he would noodle. I would just say he would start playing around with the guitar, and he'd hit an interesting chord thing which would remind him of a song or something, and then that would touch him off. So that's why we just rolled tape.
Producing for Lenny was basically being a traffic cop, getting in all the traffic to run on time and to make the things move along, etc. Provide a little reassurance that when you started that you weren't going to get stopped. Let him take a break when he needed to take a break. Let him not take too long a break so that he left the studio.
And he's a performer, and you do whatever you can to make him comfortable and allow it to happen. You have to make the environment comfortable so that he feels that he can just play, as opposed to it being structured, and it just kills it.
5 O'Clock Bells was, I thought, his best stuff, okay? He had this song that he could sing, 5 o'clock bells in the morning. I thought it was brilliant. I said, we don't make a single out of this and put it on easy listening stations, you know? You know, cut out the guitar and just have him going 5 o'clock. And sort of the second album was more in the vein of the 5 O'Clock Bells as an album. The final recording was all those things that he did in the studio that weren't something like 5 O'Clock Bells. So they were, I wouldn't say it was afterthoughts, but they were good pieces of music that weren't necessarily to the ear harmonious to what we were doing with the first 2 recordings.
His career, after we released the first 2 albums, he was in demand. We promoted, we couldn't put him on the road. He didn't want to tour, and quite frankly, I don't think he could have. You know, he would have needed a full-time personal manager and road manager to be with him, and that would be prohibitive in terms of the amount of monies that he could bring down. So what we did was saturation bombing. We sent out massive review copies and promotional copies to all of alternative radio, all the college radio, to every alternative publication that there was that we could possibly find. We probably sent out 2,000 or 3,000 promotionals of the first one. This is, without making a penny, of course, nothing. This was the only thing, it was the only way that we had of promoting them, and it worked. We got massive, immediate response to in college airplay, and we got an extraordinary amount of good reviews.
He was not in such great shape when he was up in New York. The 3 albums that he made for Adelphi, they were really heralded among fans because fans were starved for his music, and there were some great things on those albums, but they weren't really Lenny at his finest. He was apparently not completely comfortable in the studios that he was in, and you can hear his playing is just a little bit off in some places, but still they're very good albums. Yeah.
At the end of the final session, I sat with the engineer. We did the sort of close down of the studio. I think it was January. It was wintertime. And, in New York, when it snows, there's no place to put the snow. So it builds up these big snow banks. And I lived in Midtown, and I had to leave the studio on West 20th Street and take the subway up. And as I'm walking down the street, there's Lenny around the corner from a methadone clinic where he had scored some methadone and took it right away, passed out in a snowbank. So I'm watching this as the police are driving up. I mean, New York's a pretty efficient place for like policing the street. Somebody calls it in, et cetera. And they come and they hold him off, and he went to Bellevue for 6 weeks. Because it was detox, he'd done that. Plus he might have had some residual effects of like frostbite or some kind of hypothermia or something. So I visited him in the hospital. He says, everything is great, no problem. It was just something happened. And it was after that that he decided that he needed to go to California. Because he was going to check into this rehab place in LA, and I had to get him his airline ticket, which he never repaid me for, so he owes me $900. If you hear from him, let me know, okay? But I heard from him in LA. He says, yeah, I'm getting cleaned up, this is great, etc. He was in a clinic in the Los Angeles area. I don't know the geography so well, but he called me on the phone from there. Or actually, I had his number and I called him back. And he said, yeah, I gotta get back to stuff. I'm cleaning up, everything's great. Hey, you gotta record this band I'm playing with here. And so there's a band in the rehab clinic. He says, yeah, I got Nicky Hopkins on piano and Gabor Szabo on guitar. Man, we're killer. So that was Lenny, okay? The Lenny Breau people who sort of knew him before tended to be Canadian, tended to be people coming out of a Canadian country music background or pop music background, etc. So this was from outer space as far as they were concerned, but they didn't write bad reviews of it. All the bad reviews that he had gotten were essentially record reviewers who'd never heard him play live, who get a stack of the vinyl and sit down and listen and said, this guy's crap. Well, because if you give a jazz review or a stack of records by somebody who's supposed to be a jazz artist and he's not playing jazz or even in a jazz context, they got bad reviews. Nobody else has ever approached what he did, certainly not in the way that he went about doing it. He's a pretty unique talent, and the only recordings that you can actually hear in any depth what he was doing are those recordings, because everything else that he did, maybe he made a couple more that were, spread his wings a little bit and played a little bit more, but he wasn't playing with really top flight jazz musicians. And I think by subtracting the accompaniment, we did a better thing by him. I mean, it was him. Okay, you want to take a break? Okay, what do you want to do next? I think I'm going to do Pan's Pad. Okay, who was Pan? Pan was this guy that we knew in Toronto, and he was a cool cat.
All serious artists that are magicians are quirky. Actually, in his own way, Lenny's personality was much easier to deal with than some of these other great but really crazy musicians. I mean, Lenny only had one problem, although it was a big one, and that was drug addiction. But he was very easy to work with and one of the nicest guys you would ever want to meet, period.
I would say he was technically the greatest guitar player I ever saw or heard, okay? That was one aspect of his life. The other aspects of his life were that he was a pleasant person, he was nice, he had a severe drug dependency, he was uneducated, and he was vulnerable. I don't think he was tourable. He was like a location type guy because he just had too many problems with all that stuff. So it was Nashville or Toronto or New York or Los Angeles. He didn't even play in Washington. We were trying to get him to come down here and play. Couldn't do it. Couldn't get him to 250 miles from New York down here in one piece to be able to play for the record company.
You can't compare him to the lead guitar player of the Rolling Stones or something like that, but because those are pop stars. They're not great guitar players, but they're pop stars. But in terms of ongoing forever, Lenny Breau will live in the annals like Django, I suppose. It was way ahead of his time. Also, it's extraordinary, and I'm just honored to have been in this production line to have dealt with these brilliant people. And that's all I can say. It makes me want to cry even that he's dead and gone, because think of all the stuff that could have come. You know, as he became more popular and did a little more interfacing with other musicians, this guy would have been the limit. He would have eventually surrounded himself with other extraordinary musicians. I trying to feature a jam session with him and others of his ilk, able to actually interface. It's mind-boggling, but it won't happen. But we can think about it, and that goes in when I think about Lenny. That's what I think about. But I think mostly about that we captured it, and it was wonderful, and I'm proud to be a party to it.